Hello, everybody, and welcome to Life After Death and Beyond. I'm James from Praagh with my good friend Kellee White. Hello, Kellee.
Hi, James, and hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Very excited about
very
tonight.
exciting. We explore lots of different topics about life after death and beyond, and different levels of consciousness and awareness, and all different types of things. And tonight we have an incredible guest, Peter A. Levine. And Kellee, I'm going to have you introduce his background, since it's more in your way of your field, in a way.
My goal has always been to put together spirituality with psychology. And I was really fortunate to get to meet Dr. Peter Levine, our special guest tonight, through our dear friend, Dr. Shirley Pellizzeri. And she introduced me to Peter years ago and his work on trauma. And I've been so touched by it for years. So we're so thrilled that he's going to be a guest tonight. But let me tell people who may not be familiar with his work about Peter. So I'm going to just tell you a short bio here about Peter. Dr. Peter Levine is the developer of somatic experiencing. That's a naturalistic and neurobiological approach to healing trauma. He holds doctorates in both biophysics and psychology. He is the founder and president of the Ergos Institute for Somatic Education and the founder and advisor for Somatic Experiencing International. Dr. Levine is the author of several best-selling books on trauma, including Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma, which has been published in over 29 languages, and his most recent book, An Autobiography of Trauma.
There we go.
A Healing Journey, and it is fantastic. He's received Lifetime Achievement Awards from Psychotherapy Networker and from the U.S. Association for Body-Oriented Psychotherapy. He continues to teach trauma healing workshops internationally. Now, Dr. Levine's incarnation on Earth, I have to say, has changed the way we all view trauma, the way we view healing, and the way we view therapy. And the quote that Peter has said is, trauma is perhaps the most avoided, ignored, belittled, denied, misunderstood, and untreated cause of human suffering. So we are pleased to welcome Dr. Peter Levine.
That's good to be with you.
Hello, Dr. Levine. Nice to have you. Thank you for being our guest tonight.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward.
Yes.
Oh, we loved your book. I mean, James and I all week have been talking about your book. It has just moved both of us so much.
Wow. Thank you.
And there's so much in there about that. I mean, we both can relate. Everyone can relate to, but
Yes.
Connections, like really strong in there about, where you lived in the Bronx growing up. My father lived there. Certain experiences you had with trauma growing up. I had very similar. In your book, it's about being vulnerable and opening up to the public about your vulnerability, which is something I had to do. I'm sure Kellee had to. And that really moved me. Even writing the book at the very beginning, the preface, I was really moved. You said, I'm sharing these words with you, reader. And, you don't know what's going to happen, but you put it all out there. You put your truth out there, and I applaud you.
Yeah. And your work has helped so many people generationally, Peter, generationally.
Mm.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit, everybody who doesn't know your work, could you tell us about how this all came about for you, how you started with trauma?
Well, it goes back to about 1966 or thereabouts. I was working with a number of men who had high blood pressure, and I found that relaxing a certain sequence of muscles in the jaw and the neck and the throat, sometimes the blood pressure would drop 10, 15, 20, even 30, occasionally even 40 points. So I kind of pursued that. But then I was more observant of what would come up when I was doing those exercises were all kinds of events, which we would now call trauma, that occurred to them and that they were overwhelmed by at different times in their life. Now, when I started developing somatic experience in 1969 into the mid-1970s, that was way before the definition of trauma as PTSD from the diagnostic manuals. And so I didn't know, thankfully, that a trauma was supposed to be a brain disorder, maybe even a brain disease, that at best could be managed with drugs, with medication, and with helping people change their negative thoughts. So I discovered it was something that really actually happened in the body. So, I mean, you think of an example, you go outside and you see somebody's been injured, fallen off a bicycle and been injured. Well, your brain recognizes injury and is very responding. And so you get a twisting in your gut. And then you look and you see that, well, gosh, it may be really badly hurt. Of course, you call for the ambulance first, but then the gut twists even more. So what's going on here is, yes, the brain recognizes different kinds of threat, and especially to injury. When I've worked with a number of military people, Marines and Army people, you know, they were much more traumatized by seeing somebody wounded than being wounded themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, our brain recognizes that and sends that signal. There's a nerve, it's called the vagus nerve. Now I'll do my biophysics bit. And this nerve is the largest nerve in the body by far. It's an enormous nerve, and vagus comes from the Latin root of vagabond, which means the wanderer. So this nerve goes down into our cavities, down below the diaphragm, and innervates all of our gastrointestinal system, and also our heart and our lungs. And this is a two-way information highway. And what I mean by that is, it turns out that, and Charles Darwin actually recognized this back in the 1860s, that this nerve is primarily afferent, sensory. In other words, it's actually taking information from our guts and relaying that information up to our brains. So let's go back to the injury example. We see the injury, the motor part of the vagus nerve twists our guts, and then that twisting gets picked up by those sensory fibers, and the 80% of that goes back up to the brain and amplifies that. So we go from to and then maybe that night we lay down in bed and we notice our guts are tight, and then we see pictures from that event. And of course, for most something like this, it'll pass. But when this has been repeated and when there's been a high degree of overwhelm and helplessness, it gets stuck. And so what I learned was that the way to change that is changing the information that's coming from our guts back up to the brain, which says it's all clear. That event is over. It's in the past where it belongs. But how we do that, that's a bit of a trick. And so for many years, I tried to find out how I could get that new signal coming from the guts. And I came across actually a very, very simple exercise, which stimulates those receptors in the gut and sends the all clear message up through the sensory part of the vagus nerve, and then we re-regulates ourselves, down-regulates ourselves. So, and if you want, we can do this together. It may open up different sensations, feelings. Many people feel feelings of spaciousness, of openness. Sometimes they relate it to spiritual experiences that they may have had. And again, I don't want anybody to do it if it feels too much. But the idea, if you wish to do it with me, and I'll demonstrate it, is take an easy full breath, and on the exhalation, make the sound voo, vibrating it as though it's, well, coming from the belly, vibrating it in the belly, and then let the breath and the sound go all the way out, and then wait for the next breath to come in, filling belly and chest, and then repeat. So I'll do it once, and then we can do it together. So easy full breath. And let the breath and the sound all the way out. Good. And let the breath come in, filling belly and chest. And once again. Good. And just notice, that will be curious sensations, feelings, thoughts, images, whatever comes up, whatever arises in your awareness. And if you want to share what you might have noticed.
I just had clarity. I felt clarity is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, that's typical.
Yeah, I'm typical.
This
For me, it was very calming.
uncalming. Yeah, often people experience warmth or vibration, tingling, energy moving in their body, many different kinds of sensations, just by doing this one simple exercise, which took outside 1 minute, 2 at the very most. And so again, there's a saying that Archimedes he wrote, that if you find a place, if I can find a place, a fulcrum to put my lever, I can move the world.
It's great.
And I think some of these type of interventions having to do with the body is really about that, is finding that place to find the fulcrum so that you can move out of those stuck places, out of those states of hyperarousal, sympathetic adrenal, or vagal shutdown.
And Peter, it seems so simple. I think the truths are very simple, but humans want to make it more complex. Do you find that to be true?
Yes. Oh yeah, it's very, very simple.
It's very simple. The truths are very simple. And I love in the book you talk the term body memory, which I think is fabulous. Body memory of the emotional trauma. It's pretty good. Love that one.
Yeah, I know for sure.
And I want to share with you also, before you came on the show, months ago, I guess Kellee would say months ago, I saw a documentary on Einstein on Netflix, very good, about the bomb. You must have seen that. And afterwards, I said to Kellee, I don't know, Kellee, how we came across, I said, Einstein is a guide to someone.
Yes.
I know it, and he's around. And
it was about 2 days later that I was reading your book, and you talked about Einstein being your guide.
Yeah.
So it all came together here.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing that experience?
I will. I mean, that's probably a good place to start, because it's kind
it's a great place to start here.
Because there's stuff in the book that are difficult, but this one was probably one of the more moving experiences in my life.
And your description is incredible, by the way. The vivid imagination, you called it.
The active imagination.
I love your descriptions. So tell everybody about your experience, please.
I will. So this was around in the early 70s. I was starting to work with a group of Berkeley therapists to try to teach them what I was doing so they could then, learn how to do it. And so I would meet with them every week or every other week in my, call it my tree house in Wildcat Canyon. And then I was also doing my doctoral work in medical biophysics, which was quite a challenge. I mean, the academic world can be vicious. So anyhow, at the end of the day, I went down to my favorite restaurant on San Pablo Avenue called the Beggar's Banquet. I did a reading just this last Sunday at a real bookstore. It turned out there was a woman sitting in the front. She looked about my age, and she also lived on San Pablo Avenue, and that was her favorite restaurant.
Wow.
Oh my God, what a great confirmation.
Synchronicities, exactly, these synchronicities. They're adorable. Anyhow, so I would come there, and the waitresses knew me by name. They were very kind, and they would sit me down at usually the same table. It was a table with 2 chairs. And usually I would start with a bowl of this warm soup, along with some French bread, some crunchy on the outside, soft and moist on the inside. And like all of my troubles and my disenchantment from the day kind of receded, and I just kind of felt deeply nourished. So one day I'm sitting there with my perennial bowl of soup, and there's a movement off to my left, a shadow, and I look up quickly, and I see a man with crazy unruly hair and wearing a sports jacket like 3 times too size for him, and all crumpled up. And he points to the other chair. And so I assume he's wanting me to invite him. And I do. I point to the chair. Yes, please sit down. And then I realized this was Albert Einstein. And I remember, I'm coming from at this time, a scientific background.
Yeah.
But I was also very open to other possibilities, to other realms. And there's something, I believe Carl Jung was the one who first named it, called active imagination. And it's really the way the conscious and unconscious minds can work together, can cooperate together. And I did a little research on that, and I learned, they need to unlearn, that active imagination is only something that children do. The adults can't do that anymore. And I remember thinking, God, adults need it more than anyone else. So at least I had a scientific basis, maybe from phenomenological, but a scientific basis, that these weren't real encounters. And so for about a year, we would have these meetings, and I would ask him questions, and then he would ask me questions about my questions.
Right.
This is kind of like the method of Socrates, the Socratic method of inquiring. But that really, really bolstered my explorations, because the questions he asked about my questions really took me to the next step. And then finally, at the end of that year, I was noticing that I was working with people, and it's not things just that happened to them in this lifetime, but things that have happened to their parents, their grandparents, their great-great-grandparents, and great-great-great-great-grandparents, and all of their ancestors, that was impacting them in a profound level. So I asked the professor, I asked Einstein about that, and he looked at me. I could see he was deeply touched, because I know it had some meaning for him. So it's like in a dream within a dream.
Yes.
He takes me to a pond, and he has a yardstick, a meter stick, with a number of stones all along the stick, the yardstick. And we go over to the pond, and he just twists that, and all of the stones fall together at the same time, and they all cause ripples moving out in all directions, not just forward, but forward, sideways, backwards. Of course, Einstein knew that time was not a linear sequential phenomenon, that it was part of a whole space-time coordinates. And then I said, well, what happens when there's this trauma? And he showed me that if two of these wave fronts get stuck, then everything after that in every direction becomes distorted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ego, you call them ego points in the book, I think. Ego.
Yes, yes. I never can quite figure out why he called it that.
Interesting.
Yeah. I had some theories. I actually read a wonderful book. I think it's called The Other Einstein, or Einstein's Wife, or something like that. It's a wonderful book. And he talks about how he, in a way, was very egotistical and did not give his wife credit where credit was due. So I have a feeling that might have had some kind of confessional thing with him. But in any case, I asked him, well, how then would I work with people who have been affected in this way? And he said, and I remember this, he nodded like this and then looked up again, and I could see a tear in his eye. And he said, Peter, I can't tell you how to do that, but I know that you will figure it out.
Wow.
Wow.
And so that was where I started, really, to get also this understanding of time-space coordinations. Okay, so anyhow, sadly, that was one of our last contacts. And again, I attributed it to active imagination, that this obviously wasn't Einstein there. It
wasn't necessarily real, but
no, but it felt
but continue.
real. It definitely felt real.
Yeah.
So anyhow, so about 35 years ago, I was visiting my parents in the Bronx. And I spent the day going to museums downtown, and I was coming back, took the D train to 205th Street, walked up the road, then, walked into my parents' apartment. And there was a big sofa there, and they were sitting on the sofa together. And there was also a bookshelf above them, like that. And I noticed Einstein's theory of relativity was one of the books, and it was kind of sticking out a little bit. And that prompted me to mention my experience with Einstein 35 years before that, 30, yeah. And so I told my parents about, my active imagination. Mm-hmm. And my mother stood up like this, and she could be really intuitive. I mean, let's just say it was a problematic relationship. But one of the things I really got from her is the gift of intuition. And she stood up straight and she said, "Peter, no, that really happened." And I thought, what? What is she talking about? And she went on to say that when I was 8 months pregnant with you, in utero, 8 months, your father and I were canoeing on this lake in New Jersey, and a big, strong wind squall came and it tipped the canoe over, and they couldn't get back into the canoe. As much as they struggled, they couldn't ride it, and they certainly would have perished, and we wouldn't be carrying on an interview today because I wouldn't be alive. So in that moment of life threat, a small sailboat came along. They saw my parents in distress, and they pulled them into their boat into safety. They introduced themselves as Albert Einstein and his stepdaughter.
Wow. Wow.
No, I mean, even if I just talk about it now, that's exactly what happens inside my whole body. Wow.
Okay, I have chills everywhere.
Yeah. And so my mother reasoned that because he saved my life,
yes,
that we would have bonded in that moment of life threat, and that we would be connected, and we still are. There's occasions where I will say, you have a few minutes for me, and I might ask him a question or share with him something about what's going on with me. So, again, I mean, how do you make sense of something like this, except that it's occurring in other dimensions? I don't know if that's the right term, but something that's a non-ordinary reality.
And Peter, we believe, James and I are spiritualists, and we're both spiritual mediums, and I'm also a psychotherapist. But we believe that we choose our families before we come in, and which means our mothers and fathers. We also choose our guides and the work that we're going to do. And I have to say, I was given your birth date, and if I crack the code of your birth date, you come in to do your karma and your dharma together.
Oh my God.
And you're an Aquarian, right, Kellee? What's the birth date?
And you're an
Aquarius. It's right on the cusp.
Yeah, but here, if you're in Vedic astrology, which is what I use, you're a true Aquarian, which comes to help and heal humanity. But your birth date means to do the karmic work and the dharmic work together at the same time, which means it was not an easy incarnation.
No.
However, it was the most worthwhile incarnation that any of us could ever imagine, because you're saving not just this generation, but generations behind because of the time-space continuum and going forward.
Before and after.
Before and after.
All at once. All at once. That rippling effect, the ripple effect that you talk about at Einstein, that rippling effect is so strong. And I do believe that, as Einstein, thoughts are energy. It's all energy. And just think of all the lives you've helped to heal. And Aquarian, being the healer, came back to heal. I mean, it's pretty remarkable, my friend. Really remarkable.
Exactly. I mean, I think of the Greek archetype, mythological figure, Chiron.
Oh, yes. The wounded healer. The wounded healer.
Yeah, exactly. And I deeply believe, and that was one of the motivations for writing this book. I'll say something about that in a minute. But I think that as healers, we owe it, yes, to ourselves, but we owe it to all the people we minister to.
Yes. To
do our own work, our own healing.
Absolutely.
And again, that was one of the reasons for writing the book. Now, I did not choose to write it as a book. that was the farthest thing from my mind.
Mm.
You know, at the age I am now, clearly, I mean, even if I stay healthy and vital and engaged and passionate, which I am, I have less time to live going forward than I have lived going back from the moment of conception. So, so I thought it was a time to really write, to excavate my story, to look at the events throughout my life and the experiences throughout my life that have shaped my growth and shaped me as the person who I am. And so it was difficult to do, but it was something, it was like really like a journal. And a very good friend of mine, a woman friend of mine, she says, I assume you're going to write this as a book. And I said, no way. It's too raw, it's too vulnerable, it's too tender, it's too revealing. And in my life, being seen could be more than uncomfortable. It could be life-threatening because of what was going on with my father, my parents, and the mafia. So everything said, do not publish. I do not put in the public. So my friend said, well, Peter, please think about it. And I said, no. And she said, please just think about it. And so often when I'm troubled, I cannot make a decision, or something's incomplete in my knowing, I'll have a chance meeting with somebody, a synchronicity, or a dream. And so I had the following dream in my equivocation. I'm standing in front of this large field, and I have in my hands I have a manuscript in my hands. Clearly it's, you know, there's typewritten on it, so it's some kind of a manuscript. And I look to the left and to the right and to the left. And again, I cannot make the decision. Then this strong breeze comes from behind me and takes all of these pages and takes them into the air, onto the meadow, to land where they may. And when I awoke, not all my dreams are like this, but when I awoke, I realized that my decision had been made, not by my conscious mind, but by my unconscious. And I still really wasn't about to do it if I didn't think that it could really help people in their own healing, in their own work. So I actually sent it to one of my earlier publishers, and he said, well, it's a grand gesture, but I don't think you're there yet. And so I worked on it for another couple of months and got back to Richard Grosinger. And he said, I can't believe it. You've done it. You're doing it. You've done what your intention was. And so that was the reason then to publish it as a book. And it may not be easy reading for many people, but it's my truth. And I was committed to tell my truth wherever it would go. You know, I listened once to a talk by Isabel Allende, and she quoted a Jewish proverb, which goes, what is truer than truth? Answer the story. And I believe that we all have our stories to tell, valuable stories. And if not now, when? And so in different parts of the book, I really encourage people to tell their story.
And in your vulnerability, Peter, it will help everybody with shame and blame and guilt and all kinds of important issues that lead to healing.
Yep.
And I have a question for you, Peter. Since you started with Einstein and your guide, since then, since that was over, have there been other guides that have come into your space, or have you thought out? Yes. Anyone that we would know, or?
Well, I think of two. Some time ago, it must have been around 1980, I was at a party in Boulder, and I met this really lovely woman, and we talked. And we shared some things, and I mentioned to her a dream I had a few nights before. And in the dream, I go into a room, and there's some kind of a monk or something like that, or I guess a lama, and he has a black robe, and then purple sashes going down to the bottom of the robe. And so I look at him. I'm clearly moved by him. I know somehow I'm supposed to be meeting him. And so he hands me this wooden box. And then he doesn't even point. He nods slightly to this door that goes into another room. And so I open the door, go into the room, and at the back of that room, there's a large cast iron safe. And again, without words, I know that I'm supposed to take this safe, this box, and put it in the safe and keep it there. So the next morning, I worked on the dream, and I worked with the image of the box, and I realized it was like the treasure box from one of my favorite childhood books and movies, Treasure Island. So it was a treasure chest. But somehow I was supposed to take this treasure chest, presumably a treasure, and put it into the safe. And then I was telling this to this woman, it started to make sense. That in a way, developing my work, developing somatic experiencing, was it was in a way putting in a Western rationalistic, scientific, psychological framework what had been known for centuries, maybe thousands of years. So that my job was to keep it in safe by putting into a language that would be accessible and acceptable. And so I just kind of, as afterwards, I let that go. But she left before this woman at the party, she took a little, like one of those note cards, index card, and in beautiful calligraphy, she wrote the phone number of a monk in Berkeley. And I happened to be teaching in Berkeley. And so I was looking for something in my wallet, and this accidentally fell out of my wallet onto the table. And it had the name of the Lama and his phone number. So, and this was way before cell phones, so I went down, I used the phone in the house, and I called the number, and somebody, must have been one of his students, answered. And I said, would it be possible to talk to the Lama? And he said, okay. I think he even said something like, I think he's expecting a call, but that seems, again, impossible. Anyhow, I told him about, my insights and my developing of the methodology. And I asked him, does he think that there's any overlap with this and different Tibetan healing traditions? And he said, yes, definitely the Kumnai tradition, which is a body-oriented, tantric body-oriented approach. He said, yes, there's a lot of similarities there. But what you're describing is something that's happened all over the world and at different times. And the original spiritual opening, the spiritual temple, was from the Stone Age temples in Ireland.
Wow.
And so after that, of course, I ran to the Berkeley Library, and I found a book that had pictures of these Stone Age temples. And there was one from Newgrange. I think I have a picture of that also in the book. And it was, in order to pass through this, pass through the door to the portal into the spiritual dimension, you had to go over this obsculus, this big, heavy elliptical stone that had spirals going in opposite direction, pairs of spirals going in opposite direction. And this was one of this is one of the most important insights I had in teaching the work of working with these complementary vortices, the trauma vortex and a counter vortex. So anyhow, again, to tell you the truth, and I think you won't think I'm crazy, but I absolutely am convinced that I've been guided in this way.
Oh, totally.
And somehow, and that people that I needed to be with and learn from, in one of the chapters in the book, it says the four most important women in my life and the four most important men in my life. And those are people, they are giants whose shoulders I stand on. And they have, in different ways, influenced me, both feeling-wise, but also academically or intellectually, scientifically. So, like you said, and somebody else said essentially the same thing to me, that somehow my karma and my dharma got entangled with each other.
Yeah.
And I've really been able to separate them. And I don't think I'm really that interested in trying to separate them. I think they belong where they belong.
Just fine, Peter. I think you're perfect just the way you are. I often say the phrase, which I love, which reminds me when you talk about synchronicity, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous.
Oh, that's good.
Right. And I think everything, there's also the theory, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Well, you would know about the different levels of awareness or beingness. And to me, in a simple way of describing it, that the soul, for me, this human vessel is maybe 30% of the soul, where 70% of the soul is beyond the human comprehension and outside of time. And, so it's so much out there that we don't understand, but we keep on comparing to the human experience, which is almost impossible to describe a seventh dimension in a three-dimensional world, huh?
Yeah. Another thing that Einstein said, not to me personally, but I read it. He said there are two ways to look at the world, to look at the universe. One is that nothing is a miracle, or that everything is a miracle.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I think part of your book and part of you and Kellee and myself, I think it's when I was reading the book, it came that theme over and over, which I love, the art of discovery. Always being able to discover something new with each page, with each word. And that's throughout your book, that art of discovery, that innocence, that yearning to find things out. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I don't believe that curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity led the cat to realize its highest, greatest potential.
And give it many lives.
Well, I was constantly curious. Yeah. That was really who I was. I was the annoying curiosity kid. I was always asking the question, why? Well, okay, but why? Why that? Why this? And
Peter, nowadays, if let's say you talk to Einstein now, would the message be different? Would you find the context of the message to be different? Is it a different experience? Can you describe it if it's different or not, or what's that like?
The first thing that came into mind is I would say, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of my life.
Yeah.
Not just for me, but for many, many others in this way.
And Peter, what do you think happens when you leave the body at death? What do you think what happens at death?
Yeah, oh gosh, I was asking that question myself. The last chapter in the book is called Living My Dying. And it's one I've really pondered quite a bit. And I had a very dear friend, Butch. He's one of the people I dedicate the book to. And he had pretty serious alcohol problems, very serious alcohol problem. But he really helps people. He helps organizations that work with traumatized children or sexually abused or sex trafficked kids. And I remember sitting with him one day when it was clear that he was on his way. And I said, but when I wonder about dying, it's a difficult thing for me to think about this. And I wonder what it is like for you. And he looked at me and he said, I think I'd be able to help more people.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. You can see where I wanted to dedicate the book to him.
Yeah. Absolutely. Peter, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, Henrique, when your mother passed.
Henrique. Yeah. When I talk I talk many cultures, one race, the human race, and I talk about more of the shamanic cultures and more indigenous cultures and more, European cultures and so forth. And Enrique was a person I had the the privilege to have met a friend of mine, a Brazilian friend, connected us together. And he's what's called in Brazilian, a Pai de Sant, which means a father saint in the Umbanda religion.
Yeah.
And it's a type of shamanism, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so I spent a couple of times just spending time with him at his fazenda. Fazenda is like a farm in the, in a clearing in the jungles. And when we would go, we would stand outside, and there was we were in a circle of these rotund women in white dresses from Bahia. They're called Baiana women.
Yeah, Salvador Bahia. Yeah.
Sí, Salvador de Bahia.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very spiritual and holding presence. And so then he'd come up to us, and he'd take a glass of water, but a thinner bottle. So this was easier to balance. And until we could just stand there and just keep the glass still while we were shaking inside, then he knew we were ready to do, I guess you could call it a reading. So one of these years in March, my mother died unexpectedly, and she drowned in a bathtub. And I felt tremendous guilt because I'd been trying for now 3-4 years to get her, because I could see her health and mental status was failing. And I was encouraging her to move out because she loved Berkeley. And then I have 2 brothers who are different kinds of doctors. One is one of the world's authorities on pain, which she was suffering, and the other one does Chinese and Tibetan medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy. But I couldn't get her to budge. And then when she died, I felt tremendous guilt that maybe she committed suicide, because she just couldn't leave the place where she lived for all her life. And so we went in, and Enrique had us walk around the farm. We make offerings to all of the black slaves that were there and that were killed, and ask their permission to be on the land and so forth. It's a beautiful ceremony. And we would go and we would pick leaves, and he would have us hold the leaves in our hands and be aware of which hand we picked what leaf in. So then we came back and we put the leaves together in this big bowl, and then we went for lunch. And they just prepared this incredible feast. Simple, but just incredible feast. And then afterwards, we sat with Enrique. We were on one side. He was on the other side of the bowl with the leaves. And the leaves had formed into a mandala.
Wow.
Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, Peter," because nobody else knew about this. I was the one who knew about it. He said, "I see your mother just passed. Yeah, and she wants you to know. She wants you to know that it was an accident, that wasn't suicide. It turned out it was exactly an accident, and we later found out because of her pain. She was having these patches, opioid patches, and she had one on, and she didn't realize it, and she put on a second one, and so hot bath, she overdosed." But he then said, because it's like a weight came off of me. And he also said, and she's sorry for so many of the things that she did and didn't do. And she wants you to know that if you ever want, you can always call on her and she'll help you from the other side. So how we knew all of that and knew when to transmit it and knew what to say and what not to say. I mean, again, to really appreciate and honor these different cultures that I had the privilege of meeting over my lifetime.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. Yeah.
Well, that's the work that we do, James, and you've helped thousands and millions of people with the work you do, with giving those messages.
And I've been to Brazil many times, and I've had experiences like this, and candomblé, and I've had ceremonial, and entranced there, and
Sure.
nothing like mediumship there. The spiritism and the mediums there. I've seen materializations of spirit. I've seen apports come right out. Amazing, the Brazilians. That the whole energy there is so alive, isn't it? It's so natural.
Yep. So, and the movements are so natural.
Yes.
You know, I mean, when we stay downtown, you know, in this nice little hotel for $12 a night.
Yeah.
And would walk around at night, and every street corner you'd see children dancing and moving. They would have their, you know, their boombox there, and they would be doing samba and forró, which is more typical dance of that part of the beast. And it was just, you just got held by that warmth.
And you're making me cry because I've been there for years. I used to bring groups down there for, gosh, at least 10 years. So all the different spiritual centers around all over Brazil. Yeah. I've done book tours there. And there's, I call them heart people, because you just feel and you bring that back. And thank you. Is your book in Portuguese? Is it in Portuguese?
Several of the books are in Portuguese.
Yeah.
I don't know. Actually, it was kind of interesting. I was doing an interview the other day. And this is I guess it's some kind of a group that does, I'm not sure exactly, some kind of counseling or what do you call it when it's not therapy, it's I'll think of it or not. Anyhow, one of the people on that faculty was one of my dear students in Brazil. And I had a dream about her 2 nights before.
Wow.
I mean, yeah.
That's how spirit works.
That's
yes,
how spirit works. It really is.
You don't have to convince me.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I sent her an email and shared with her a little bit how wonderful it was, and wondering how her daughter was doing and her husband was doing. And yeah. And she, you know, and I think a number of my Brazilian students really bring together some aspects of spiritism with the somatic experiencing work in a good way,
It would be hard not to, because that's who they are. This is natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Medium there in Brazil, and it's just so natural. Which is just one area in their life is around that, and it's just so natural and loving.
I miss Brazil.
I know, me too. I have a question before we close, Peter. I wanted to ask you, Einstein now. What do you just assume maybe what that soul is doing right now? If you could pierce into the veil there, what do you think Einstein is up to?
I think he was still looking for the theory of everything.
Yeah, yeah. Still teaching, probably, of course, but.
Yeah.
It's great.
No, I think he also really would be suffering a lot from the way things are in the world, the heartbreaking way things are. Because he was very emotional.
Sensitive man, very sensitive.
Very sensitive man, very sensitive.
It's amazing. Thank you, Peter, very much for joining us today.
One more thing.
Yeah.
When I was working on that chapter, Living My Dying, I felt that my final gift was to come back to that 18-month-old child who was filled with enthusiasm and curiosity. And if it's okay, I want to just briefly.
Please. Wow.
I love that picture. Wow. I love that baby.
Yeah,
wow.
Me too.
Oh.
Me too. And I know that's the part of me that was always whole.
Yeah.
Was always whole. Yeah.
Oh. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your life.
Yeah, it's great meeting you. Really great.
No
wonderful
words
to see you.
And
no words.
No words. You're living in Encinitas?
I live in Encinitas. We'll have dinner together. Yes.
Yeah. Somehow get me your phone number.
I will. Yeah, we'll go to Frenzy and celebrate.
Oh yeah. No kidding. Unfortunately, I'm leaving the country soon, so kind of things are tight. But yeah, that was great. I look forward to having another local buddy.
Yeah, who kind of in the same mindset.
Well, and especially Peter, I understand you're writing another book, possibly spirituality, trauma, and spirituality.
Trauma and spirituality, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm doing this one with a very good friend, a student of mine, a really, really solid meditation, Tibetan meditation teacher. And we're working on that together. Actually, we'll be meeting and work on it for 3 days. We're doing some kind of a class together in Switzerland. And so we'll get together for a few days before that and kind of compare notes and see where we want to go. But yeah, those are that's the book that I'm actually working on. There's one other book that I want to do with a friend of mine on healthy sexuality for adolescents, because of what kids are exposed to. It's really horrific.
That's a great idea. Great.
Yeah.
I feel like you and I know the same people. It's really weird. But I have a feeling that we know a lot of the same people.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'd be
I'd be surprised if we didn't.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter, for again, like Kellee, your wisdom and your insights, and for sharing with everybody.
Thanks for spending this time together. It's been a joy.
Oh, it's pleasure is all ours. We're so happy you were with us tonight. And everybody, please read An Autobiography of Trauma. You will not be able to put this book down.
No, each sentence.
It's phenomenal. It's a gem. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you. Be well, and let's connect.